right, guys, let's start. Okay. So today we are starting a new topic called ethics, right? See, ethics is very important for CFA level one, right? Anybody who has studied for CFA, who has got CFA charter, will always tell you that ethics is a very important topic to pass your CFA exam. I'm not saying it is very difficult, right? Once you develop the understanding for this topic is not that difficult, right? But there are small points here which are very vital to understand and implement, and CFA Institute plays a lot of importance in understanding of ethics and how ethics in general build your trust in your investment management profession, right? So very important. The weightage of this subject in CFA level one is around 15 to 20%. So very vital, very important to understand. Uh, Looking at the weightage, you can understand, right? 15 to 20% of your exam will be ethics. If you score well here, right? If you score well here, you will definitely do good, and it becomes easier to pass in the examination, right? And the good thing about ethics is that ethics continue in CFA level 2 as well. So if you become master of ethics here in CFA level 1, right, almost the same things continue in CFA level 2. The pattern changes, it becomes more like case studies, and there are some certain additional things which also come, and the difficulty level also increases. But overall, the basics doesn't change, right? So it's a double benefit, right? If you become good in ethics here, right? So that's the introduction, and with that introduction, let's try to understand ethics in the investment management profession. And for this, we will study in a different way. So see, as I told you, right, ethics is very vital. Ethics is very verbose. Ethics is 15 to 20% of your syllabus. So they're very small points, right? And you can't write all those small points when you're teaching the class, right? So we'll use technology as much as possible for our help, and we'll try to answer the question using the technology, right? So we'll try to go in a way that we understand things easily, as well as we make sure that you know we move fast as well as we understand better. Okay. All right. So when you talk about ethics, right? Ethics, if you think about ethics, right? Ethics can be, if I make it a little bigger so that you can understand better, right? Ethics can be described as a set of your Ethics can be described as a set of shared beliefs about what is good or acceptable behavior, what is bad, unacceptable. Ethics conduct has been described as a behavior that follows moral principles. Ethics conduct has also been described as conduct that improve outcome for stakeholders. So it's a win-win situation for people if they are ethical in their dealings, right? Anybody who's dealing directly or indirectly is affected by the conduct. And there are many examples which are given here, right? So clients, co-worker, employers, investment professional as whole have to follow ethical standards, ethical dealings. Some dealings may bring the positive result for you, but even if it's a negative consequence, it's okay, right? Till the time you are following the ethical behavior, right? It's the behavior that balances your self-interest with the impact from others, right? Now, the next part is that we try to understand the role of code of ethics in defining a profession, right? So, the code of ethics is a written set of moral principles that can guide behavior by describing what is considered an acceptable and good behavior. Having a code of ethics in any organization, especially investment management profession, is a way to communicate the values, principles, and expectation of an organization or the group of people, and provide a general guideline to what constitute acceptable behavior, right? So these are rules, standards that require minimum level of ethical behavior. And again, these are just the general guidelines. Just understand the meaning of the definitions, right? Profession, you already know what's a profession, right? Profession itself refers to a group of people with specialized skills, specialized knowledge. You are working, and you are accepted to behave in accordance with the code of ethics, right? So it's a way for a professional to communicate to the public and the member their knowledge and skills, right? So that's what we understand. Very simple, very straightforward, nothing very difficult. Now we move to the next part, right, which is describe professions and how they establish trust, right? Now, what is a profession? Profession is an occupational group. I told you, doctors, lawyer, all have their own code of ethics, right? Similarly, investment management professional also have code of ethics, right? Anybody who has a specialized knowledge, they have to act in an ethical way to serve the larger community. So a code and standards of professional behavior, a regulatory body of knowledge, focus on the need of client, focus to service society, requirement to client's interest first, very, very important. Focus on the requirement for continuing education because you have to upskill yourself, right? Ways that your professions establish trust, right? They require higher standards, establish standards and ethical behavior. You monitor the professional conduct, encourage continuing education, focus on clients' need, and you need mentoring and inspiring other in profession. Till now, if you ask me, is there an exam level question here? No, nothing like that, right? It's just a definition. You need to understand everybody's code of ethics, right? And all that. Nothing else, right? Very simple starting of ethics, very general knowledge kind of thing. So they are just introducing that what all ethics consist of, right? Then describe the need for high ethical standards in investment management. I think I've explained enough, right? In investment management, it's very, very important that people follow ethical standards because real money is involved here, right? If you fail to act in a highly ethical manner, it can damage not only client wealth, but also impede the success of investment firms and investment professionals because potential investors will be less likely to use the services. Right, very, very important. So there is a social responsibility because they are entrusted with clients' wealth. There is responsibility to use their specialized knowledge and skills to protect and grow your client's assets, right? So there is that uh, trust in investment professional takes on a given greater importance than other businesses, right? Unethical behavior obviously will lead to losses, right? You understand, can have negative effects for the society as a whole. The financial service industry serves as an intermediary between your savers and those seeking financing guidance for the business activities. If there is a lack of trust, people will not come, the clients will not come to the advisors. So it is very important that investors are pacified and investors know that you are following the ethical standards. When investors cannot rely on the information they receive from financial services professional, there is a risk on top of their investment skill the investor face, right? So that's what it is required, right? So even the perception of something, right, is bad, right? Even if it's a perception that there is additional risk, will reduce the amount of invested and increase the returns required to attract investor capital, right? So ethics is very important. There is a misallocation of capital business other than those with the most potential for growth and societal benefit, reduce the growth of an economy and well-being of its people. False information, misleading information can affect the allocation of capital. So it's very important. Professional in investment management, you know that, right? I think everybody of you is smart. Professionalism is that uh, the clients want that their behavior should be professional in nature. Clients of investment professional rely on expertise, judgment, and ethical principles. Ethical principles are of greatest importance because clients do not have significant knowledge about financial securities, fee structure, or sources of potential bias. So that is very, very important to be ensured. Currently, some financial professionals are held to a suitability standard also, while others are held to a fiduciary standard. What is the suitability standard? Please understand. When we talk about suitability, suitability refers to the match between client return requirements and risk tolerance and the characteristic of the securities recommended. So you are thinking, you are finding out whether certain thing is suitable for a certain client or not, right? And then there is a fiduciary. Fiduciary is much stronger than your simple suitability requirement. Here, a fiduciary standard is stronger because requiring professional to use their knowledge and expertise to act in the best interest of the client, right? So you are uh, one is your suitability requirement, where you're saying that whatever security you're recommending that should meet the requirement of client. Fiduciary is you have to act in the best interest, right? So it is much stronger kind of requirement. Okay. Then, what are the challenges to the ethical behavior? There are definitely challenges to the ethical behavior, right? If you look at challenges, one challenge to ethical behavior is that individuals tend to overrate the ethical quality of their behavior on a relative basis and to overemphasize the importance of their own personal traits in determining the ethical quality of the behavior. So, the point here is that it is claimed that external or situational influences are a very important determinant of the ethical quality of behavior other than or than your internal traits that influence behavior. So you need to be aware of your situational influences, right? External is influences. So this is more important, right? So this is very important to remember, right? This is more important, right? So one situational influence is social pressure. We understand a lot of people have done a lot of things wrong due to social pressure. Loyalty to an employer, supervisor is also very important, right? Also, loyalty to an employer, supervisor, organization, or co-workers can cause individual to act in unethical ways. They place more important on their self-interest and short-term results. That also is a thing. This is a challenge, right? The prospect of acquiring more money, obviously, greater prestige, can people force people to go on unethical behavior? Firms with very strict rule-based compliance procedure run the risk of fostering a culture that is so focused on adhering to compliance rules that individuals only ask themselves what they can do, right? So again, if you are focusing too strict, right, then also it is kind of uh, fostering, ensuring a culture where you're too focused on only following the guidelines. So the question of what behavior they should engage in based on ethical principle long-term results is often not addressed in such situation, right? So too strict is also a problem. So there has to be a balance, right? Where you are focusing on the environment, also focusing on the external situation, also focusing on the situational influence, also focusing on the internal rule based, also whether it should be too strict or not. That should also be ensured, right? All right. Next is about your comparing and contrasting your ethical standard, right? Comparing and contrasting your ethical standard with legal standard. We need to know the difference between ethical and legal standard, guys. Ethical is, uh, not all unethical actions are illegal, right? This is very important to understand. This is asked in exam also, guys. Very, very important. Not all unethical actions are illegal, and not all illegal actions are unethical, right? This is very important to understand when uh, cases, because we need to clarify that something which is defined by law, right? Not necessarily that it's unethical, right? So in some places, it may be illegal to report one's employer's action against the best interest of the clients by sharing what is considered private company information with authorities, but doing so may be considered ethical whistleblowing behavior by some, right? So that is what is very important. Very important, guys. Please remember that something which can be called illegal, right, may be considered ethical behavior by some, right? So acts of civil disobedience are that are illegal are also considered by many to be ethical behavior, right? So there are two instances here. Please remember this example, because this is very testable in exam, guys. Very important. Okay. So on the other hand, recommending investment in a relatives firm without disclosure may not be illegal, but would be considered unethical, right? So above part and then this part, both are very, very important, right? So remember, very, very important. Ethical principles often set a higher standard of behavior than your laws and regulations. Please remember this. Please remember this. New, new laws and regulations often result from recent instances of what is perceived to be unethical behavior, just as the Securities Act of 1993, the Glass-Steagall Act, and the Security Exchange Act of 1934 followed the perceived bad behavior by investment professional banker, leading to the 1929 market crash. The Sarbanes-Oxley laws following the accounting scandals, and the Dodd-Frank Act followed the 2008 financial crisis, all have been, right, made after certain disasters, and that happened recently. In general, your new rules and regulations can create opportunities for different unethical behavior. Also, in general, ethical decision requires more judgment, right? So it's a more judgmental kind of thing, and consideration of the impact of behavior on many stakeholders compared to your legal decision. Okay. Then we talk to or about your describe a framework for your Ethical decision making, when we talk about, will be improved when ethics are integrated into a firm's decision making process, right? So you have to integrate decisions into decision making process. This will allow decision makers and team to consider alternative actions as well as short-term and long-term consequences from various perspectives, improving the ethical impact of decision. To do this, it is first necessary that the firm adopt a code of ethics to guide the process, and that is why we are learning this chapter. Such integration will help you to teach, practice, and reinforce ethical decision making. And this is an important part of developing an ethical culture. The support of senior management for integration ethics into the decision making process is very important for developing a culture and process that will result in ethical decision making. Okay. Then we move to using a framework for ethical decision making. It helps the individuals identify the important issues involved, examine these issues from multiple perspectives, develop the necessary judgment and decision making skills required, and avoid your unanticipated your ethical consequences. Okay. Very easy, very theoretical, right? Very common kind of thing. The following ethical decision making framework is presented in the level 1 CFA curriculum. Remember this, guys. First is identify, second is consider, third is decide and act, fourth is reflect. So identify the relevant facts, stakeholder duties, ethical principles, consider the situation awareness, influence, additional guidance, alternative action, then decide and act. Was the outcome as anticipated, why or why not, right? So you have to understand that, right? Identify, right? Identify, consider, decide and act, reflect, right? And then we move to next part. Okay, so 4 steps. In the first step, decision makers, again, in the first step, your in the first step, decision makers need to identify the facts, which I told you. uh, Facts that have to work with and the facts they should like to have before making decisions. And the stakeholders, right, those affected by the decision must be identified. These stakeholders may include the employers, client, co-workers, the people. This part of process will also help in explicitly identifying potential conflict of interest. So this is very, very important. um, this is asked in exam. At this point, the decision maker should also be should be able to identify the ethical principle involved in decision, although greater clarity about those may be gained throughout the process. In the second step, which is uh, the framework suggests situational factors may influence decisions should be identified and considered along with personal biases that might come into play. At this point, decision makers may seek outside guidance. So in the second step, right, in the second step of your considering, you might take outside guidance. At this point, you may take outside guidance from mentor colleagues, etc., etc. The past guidance may also be sought from the legal and compliance department. The guidance from alternate sources will have to provide a variety of perspective, right? And finally, the alternative actions that have been identified or considered take into account in both short term and long term for each action. In the final step, decision makers should evaluate the outcomes, right? So this was the uh, right, evaluate the outcomes of your the final step, decision makers should evaluate the outcomes of the action that were taken. In particular, they should consider whether decisions had led to the intended results and whether opportunity is considered was given to ethical principle, etc. or not, right? So what we are understanding is that uh, when we look at this process, right, so this in the first step, right, makers need to identify the facts. This was the first thing, right? Stakeholders, we understood, affected, right? This part of the process helps in explicitly identifying your potential conflict. In the second step, you should look at the situational factor that can affect, right? Outside guidance must be sought, right? Finally, the alternative actions should be considered and evaluate the outcome action that were taken, right? So that is what we have. Let's do the question, guys. So in this easy questions for Professional standard of practice, right? Professional standard of practice are what? Are a personal view of your acceptable behavior, encompass current best practices, specify a uh, you know uh, minimum level of acceptable conduct, right? What can be the answer, guys? Think about it, because again, this is a little tricky, right? Because we are asking your professional standard of practice, right? We are asking professional standard of practice, and we have to go by your definition, right? So, professional standard of practice, when we talk about, uh, whenever, these are not a personal view, right? If you read it carefully, professional standard of practice are not are a personal view. No, it's not a personal view of acceptable behavior. Professional standard of practice encompass current best practices. No, it's not about best practices, etc. It is about specify a minimum level of acceptable conduct, right? So this is what we have. So remember that basically professional standards of practice specify a minimum level of acceptable conduct for a group or organizations, whereas the best practices are suggested behavior, not a minimum acceptable level, right? So best practices are suggested behavior. A professional code of conduct, right, can increase public trust in the profession. Yes, that can increase, right? Guarantees that members will adhere to a minimum level of ethical conduct. Nothing can guarantee, right? Guarantee is the wrong word. Include standards that provide guidance for specific behavior. Professional code of conduct, the option between A and C is a little confusing. See, professional code of conduct communicates to public that your members have promised to uphold a minimum level of ethical conduct when they are acting for the client. So there's no guarantee that all members will follow the code at all times. So that's why option B goes away. And a code of conduct may include specific standards of behavior or only state principle of conduct within a specific standard of guidance, right? So uh, if you're looking at uh, obviously it can increase public trust in the profession, right? That is what. But uh, a code of conduct may include specific standards of behavior or only state your principle of conduct without a specific standard or guidance, right? So may or may not, right? It's not unnecessary, right? So may have, right? But it's not necessary that it includes, right? Professional code of conduct does not include standards that provide guidance for specific behaviors, right? So for some behavior, it can be there, right? A code of conduct may include your specific, specific standard of behavior, right? But it can't include your what you say uh, a blanket picture kind of thing, right? So specific may have specific standards, not all, right? So it is more about A is more correct. Situational factors that influence ethical behavior are least likely to include what? Situational factors are least likely to include what? The situational factors are least likely to include your uh, social pressure. No, they are supposed they will be having social pressure. So this is large financial reward. So they will be there. So situational factors that influence ethical behavior are least likely to include a lack of ethical principle, right? Why? Because situational factors are those uh, external to the decision makers, such as your financial rewards and desire to please co-workers or others. There is a social pressure. Researchers have done their research and found that external factors are often considered more likely than your lack of personal ethics that can lead to your poor decision making. Okay. Then fourth, compared to complying with laws and regulation, complying with a code of ethics, uh, right? is considered a lower standard? No, right? It actually is a more judgment. I have ticked mark in my notes also. It includes more judgment, right? So that is what we have. Includes compliance with all laws and regulation. No, right? So this goes away. And employing a framework for decision making, right? Employing a framework for decision making that includes the ethical practices of decision is most likely to, right? If you are employing it, leads to higher profit. No, there is no guarantee for leading to higher profit, right? There is no guarantee. A decision making framework balances the interest of various stakeholders, right? Which I told you very clearly. It is not that's very profitable. It can sometimes lead to losses also, right? Avoid any unintended ethical consequences of decision. No, there will be always consequences, right? Balances the interest of your various stakeholders. Okay. So this is your question and these are your answers. So this is done. Okay. Okay. Now we have your some solved examples, right? We have to do. Okay. So see, ethics is best understood by solving a lot of questions, right? If you solve a lot of questions, you will be able to understand it more easily. So that is what is required, right? So which of the following statement is most accurate, right? Ethics can be described as what? Even though answer is given, ethics can be described as a commitment to upholding the law. No, right? It's not a commitment, right? It's not a commitment. It's an individual's personal opinion. No, it's a set of moral principles that we understand. So it's a set of moral principles that provide your guidance, right? Then we have which of the following statement is most accurate? Standards of conduct, right? Standards of conduct are a necessary component of any code of ethics, right? Sometimes you might get confused here that, okay, fine. Serve as a general guide regarding proper conduct by members of the group. This also creates a lot of confusion. Serves as a benchmark for the minimally acceptable behavior required from member of group. Minimally accepted behavior, that we understand that makes sense, right? But see, they serve as a benchmark, as a minimum acceptable standard of conduct, and some organization will adopt only part of code of ethics, which communicates the value system they have. Others may adopt both code of ethics and your standard of conduct, right? So standard of conducts basically identify specific behavior required of community members and serve as benchmark for the minimally acceptable behavior, right? So again, it is not necessary part of code of ethics, right? Uh, okay, and because some organization only take code of ethics and sometimes only take, right? So it's not a necessary component. Are a necessary component? No, it's not. A standard of conduct is different. Your code of ethics different. Serves as a general guide regarding proper conduct by members of the group. No, that is not, as a general guide. It is not there. It is a benchmark for the minimum acceptable behavior. Minimum acceptable behavior, right? So, it is, you can, if you have better behavior than that, that's great. But minimum acceptable behavior is standard of conduct. Okay. All right. Then we have another set of questions. Which of the following statement is most accurate? Right. Investment professionals have the specific responsibility to act ethically because industry is heavily regulated. No, it is not like that, right? They are entrusted to protect clients' assets. Yes, because there is higher responsibility. Profession requires compliance of its codes of ethics, right? Even the profession requires compliance with its code of ethics, but it's not a, you know, it's not a, when you say compliance, it's not a strict rule, right? It's just that they tell you that you should follow code of ethics, right? Special responsibility to protect client asset is much better. Again, this is the confusion which you get, right? Which of the following statement best complete the following sentences? Professional use their specialized knowledge and skills in service to others. Yeah, in service to others, that is the main thing. To advance their career, that is not what we are talking about. For the exclusive benefit of their employers, no. In service to others, right? Professional use specialized knowledge skills in service to others. That is what your standard of conduct and your code of ethics says. The career and deployment may benefit, but those details are not the primary focus of professional use of his or her specialized knowledge. Which of following statement is most accurate? A profession code of ethics includes code of ethics we are talking about. Includes your standard of conduct or specific benchmark for your behavior? No. I told you, right? They can be different. Ensure that all members of organization will act ethically at all time. No, it doesn't ensure anything. Publicly communicates the shared principle and expected behavior of professional member. Yes, publicly communicate, right? So profession will learn about what is the process, uh, what are principles, behavior, that is given in your code of ethics. Okay, so this is also done. So easy question, guys. Once you have understood small parts, it is not that difficult. That's why questions are very important to do. Which of the following will most likely determine whether individual will behave unethically? The person's character, the person's internal traits and intrinsic information, external factor. Situational factors we discussed, right? Situational factor. Social psychologists have shown that even good people can behave unethically in difficult situations. Situational influences, which are external factors, can shape our thinking. Okay, this I have highlighted in notes also. Which of the following statement is most accurate? Again, large financial institutions, large financial rewards or their bonuses are most powerful situational influences. They are powerful, but are they most powerful? That's the thing. When decision making focuses on short term factors, the likelihood of ethical conduct increases. Again, not entirely wrong, but yes, right. Situational influences can motivate individuals to act in their short term self interest without recognizing the long term risk or consequences of themselves and others. Right. So this is the most accurate. See, we are looking at most accurate statement. So C is the most accurate statement because situational influences, when you talk about large financial rewards are powerful, I'm not denying it, right? But it's not most powerful, right? It is powerful, right? But not most powerful. When decision making focuses on short term factor, the likelihood of ethical conduct increases, no, it decreases, right? So see the answer. Then we go to the next part. Ethical versus legal standard, which of the following statement is most accurate, right? We talk about most accurate. All legal behavior is ethical behavior. No, nothing like that. Some ethical behavior may be illegal. I covered in my notes. Yes, it is. Legal standard represents the highest standard. No, it is not. Judgment is more, right? Maybe legal. Civil disobedience is an example of what may be illegal behavior, but some consider to be ethical, right? Legal and ethical behavior often coincide, but not always are same, right? Uh, Standard of conduct based on ethical principle may represent a higher standard, may represent a higher standard of behavior. Which of the following statement is most accurate? Increased regulations are the most useful mean to reduce unethical behavior. No, right? It's not the thing. You cannot do that. Increased regulation, right? It's more about uh, education and all that, right? So actually, if you put more and more rules, that can have diverse effect, uh, can create opportunities for different similar problematic conduct. Regulator quickly design and implement laws and regulation to address practices that adversely affect the fairness and efficiency of market. No, regulators never work quickly. Uh, okay, so that's not the case. New law designed to reduce or eliminate conduct that already adversely affect the market can create opportunities for different but similarly problematic conduct. Yes, that is what has been seen by studies. Again, you have to be careful to find out the answer. Okay. Then this is a long question, right? Let's read it. You've been hired as a junior analyst with a major investment bank. Perfect. When you join the bank, you receive a copy of the firm policies as well as the training on the policy. Your supervisor is the senior technology analyst for the investment bank. As part of your duties, you gather information, draft document, conduct analysis, perform other support functions for the senior analyst. Your employer is one of several investment banks working on the IPO of a well-known tech company. The IPO is expected to increase or generate significant revenue for the investment bank participating in the offer. So that is, you are getting the money IPO has been highly anticipated in the news every day. You're thrilled when your supervisor asks you to work on several research projects related to analyzing and value of upcoming IPO. You eagerly compile, draft, you stop to consider other information which could improve things, right? You have excellent contacts in the tech who could review your work, right? You draft an email and provide some additional potential value perspective. You draft an email to contact leading. I'm working as an analysis and the valuation of such a company for investor. My employee is this, partner in the IPO. Again, you're declaring non-confidential information. I want to make sure I have considered everything. I was hoping you could have feedback on the prospect of facing big tech. Please treat all this deal as confidential. So, okay. Before hitting the send button, you stop and think about the ethical decision-making framework you have studied. You decide to apply the framework and jot down some notes as you work through the process. On the first page, you work through the identification phase and make a list of relevant facts, stakeholders to whom you owe a detailed potential conflict of interest and ethical principle. The list is shown, right? So basically, you make a list of relevant facts, stakeholders to whom you owe a duty, potential conflict, right? And list is like shown in your exhibit 3, right? So relevant facts are given. Uh, your duty, the supervisor, employer, corporate, client, asset management, employer, partners, investors, profession, society, right? And then you have conflict of potential interest include the following. You're gathering additional information from external sources while maintaining confidentiality. That's a problem. Due to the supervisor versus desire to impress. Duty to corporate client versus duty to other clients of the firm. The firm's corporate clients benefit from a high IPO price versus the firm asset management clients would benefit from a low IPO price, making the IPO look attractive to the market sell side versus the buy side, bonus, compensation, career prospect, etc. Right? So ethical principles are that are relevant to the situation, right? Duty of loyalty to employer, client, interests come first, maintain confidence and confidentiality, objectivity of analysis, fairness to market participants, right? So you have all these things, right? Uh, okay. Then you have consideration phase, situational influences, firm's return policy, bank will earn big fees, impress the boss, bonus, compensation, young position in the deal, successful wealthy man, additional guidance. You have the firm's code of ethics, written policy, peer, supervisor, compliance, CFA institute, mentor, the outside legal counsel, and then alternative action, asking contacts what they have heard, submitting the report. So you can consider the following, right? Asking contacts what they heard, submitting the report as a draft, and suggesting that contacts in industry might be able to provide more perspective, sending a survey to various technology industry veterans or listening their viewpoints as development, right? So after you complete these steps, you decide to check the firm policy under a section called research analyst role in security financing. The manual states you may not distribute any written thing material related to companies. You read the note, wall crossing policy procedure that all employees have confidential information, may not communicate the information to anyone who does not have a valid need to know. You decide that your contacts do not have a valid need to know, and that is unlikely the firm's legal compliance professional would approve sharing the information. You then decide to mention your contacts to the senior research analyst, right? He suggests that they may have some useful perspective, and you might talk to them to hear their perspective and caution you not to disclose any information about any of the firm clients, pending deals, research. You return to your desk, delete the email, and following the senior research analyst advice, call your contact on the telephone to discuss the technology sector, prospects and challenges. During the call, you take care not to reveal any details about big tech company. That's the right attitude. Whatever action take you do, you should take time afterward to reflect on the decision outcome. Was the outcome as interpreted? Why or why not, right? So let's discuss this case study. Even though this guy, what you say, did a good job because the whole uh, right idea was that uh, again he if you look at uh, this part, right? Okay, So this is a good framework, right? This is what should be done, right? You cannot disclose the information. That's what we know. Okay. So then we have example. That was the previous one was not example, right? Previous one was, if you think about it, previous one was how do you apply a ethical decision making framework, right? So this was what all you should consider and all that it was given. Now the next one is again applying a ethical decision framework. You have financial advisor who has been saving a portion of his salary to purchase a new vehicle. He's on track to have enough saved within the next 3 months. His employer has offered a special bonus for this quarter, which will go to the team that attracts the most new investors, right, into the firm investment bank. In addition to the potential bonus, the firm pays a what you say 5% commission uh, into employees who sell shares in the firm investment fund. Several of the funds are highly rated, including one designed to provide steady income to investors. The financial advisor has added only a few new investors to the firm's fund, but teammates have been very successful in their efforts. So he's doing less, teammates are doing more. The end of the quarter is 1 week away. His team is competing closely with another team for the bonus. One of the teammates informed the financial advisor that he really needs the bonus so his elderly mother can achieve medical treatment. So there's some conflict coming on. Later that day, the financial advisor meets with an elderly client on a limited income who is seeking more income from an investment portfolio. The client is 89-year-olds and poor health, right? According to client's will, the client investment portfolio will go to his favorite charity upon his death. Now, the question here is that which of the following situational influence is likely to have the most effect on the financial advisor's effort to get new clients or invest in the fund? His relationship with client, employer, or teammates? Obviously, teammates, right? Because teammates have done more, right? Teammates share in earning the bonus from the employer. In addition, the team works with each other on a regular basis when there is likelihood that social influences of working together play a role, right? So teammates have more effect, not the client or employer. And the next question is, which of the following statement is most accurate? Again, an ethical decision-making framework is only beneficial when the firm lacks a code of ethics, nothing like that. Is used to improve compliance with laws and regulations, maybe as a tool for analyzing the potential of alternative actions and consequences of decision, right? So your decision making framework will actually work on the consequences of decision, right? So that is perfectly fine. So this is wrong. Answer is C. Which of the following is most accurate? Ethical decision making framework raise awareness of different perspective, right? Sometimes, right? Focus attention on short-term consequences, no. Allocate more weight to those who will directly benefit from the decision. No, that's not ethical decision making, right? So you don't do that. Raise awareness of different perspectives. The framework should consider short-term consequences, but they're not the focus of the framework, right? So it's not the focus. Should consider, not focus. The framework may allocate more weight to those who directly benefit from decision, but this is not the primary goal, right? Of ethical decision making. Okay. Which of the following is most accurate? Ethical decision making framework are not needed if behavior is legal, wrong. Identify who gains the most from decision, wrong. Can help reduce unanticipated ethical lapses and unexpected consequences, yes. Right. Very logical, right? Because again, um, they ethical are having a higher value or higher judgment than your legal. So A goes wrong, right? Identify who gains the most from a decision, that is not part from this thing. Okay. Then we have using an ethical decision making framework, which of the following duties would most likely take precedence in the scenario described? The financial advisory duty to his client, employer, or colleague. Using an ethical decision making framework, which of the following duties would most likely take precedence? Obviously, right? Your duty to the client is the important, right? The financial advisor relationship with the client would most likely take precedence in this scenario. The advisor should put his client interest first. The exception to client interest take precedence. The exception to client's interest take precedence occurs when market integrity affects take precedence, right? So uh, exception to client, right? Whenever like client will always come first, only in the case where uh, you know market integrity comes into picture, then that takes first thing, right? So this is very tricky, guys. Always and every time you take the client's interest first, the exception to client interest take precedence when market integrity takes precedence, right? Very important. Then we have using an ethical decision making framework, the financial advisor would most likely, right, recommend that the elderly client invest at least some of his asset in the highly rated fund. No, 89 years old ill wealth. No, research other investment that can provide steady income before making a recommendation to elder client. Yeah, that makes sense. Disclose the commission he would earn before recommending that. Commission has no role here, right? So this is what we have, makes sense, right? Stakeholders, everything in this scenario, financial advisor owes a duty to his client as well as employer. His client interest take precedence over all the interest. The bonus and the colleague desire to help his mother are situational influences. To navigate the situation, financial advisor should seek additional information. It's research the risk and return parameter, fee structure that can provide steady income rather than recommended your solution, which is not ideal for the person. Okay, so then okay, this is the summary. This summary is to for you guys to read, guys. What is ethics? What is situational influences? Right, challenges, code of ethics, right? Okay, profession, requirement to uphold guidelines. Primary goal of profession is to establish trust among clients, right? So this is very important. Primary goal, remember this. Common characteristics are given: expert knowledge, encouragement, facilitation of continuing education, etc. Right? Then you have your investment management profession has become increasingly global and are trusted drawing body of formal knowledge. CFA Institute gathers knowledge from practicing investment research, right? And then likely to encounter dilemmas, have high ethical standards. Legal standard of a rule-based ethical standard goes beyond legal, balancing self-interest with the direct and legal consequences of behavior of others. A framework for decision making can help people look at and evaluate decision from different perspectives. Okay. Fine. Now this is interesting, right? This is very, very interesting. We have to see this part, right? Right, so as I was saying that this is very, very important, guys. These all questions are CFA end of the chapter questions. So you think about first question, right? Benchmarks are minimally acceptable behavior of community members. Uh, benchmark for minimally acceptable behavior of community members are what? See, benchmarks are for not for rules and regulation, right? Benchmarks are for standard of conduct, right? Benchmarks are for standard of conduct, not your rules and laws and regulations. There's nothing for laws and regulation in this chapter, right? Standards of conducts are applied to specific communities or societal groups, and you identify specific behavior required of community member. Standards of conduct serves as your benchmarks. Standard of conduct serves as your benchmark, right? So remember this, right? Whenever you see benchmarks, it is for standards of conduct, right? They apply to specific communities or societal group and identify specific behaviors required of community members, right? Then we have question number 2, specialized knowledge and skills, a commitment to serve others, and a shared code of ethics. That commitment to serve others, shared code of ethics, best characterized, right? What? A profession, right? It's not a vocation or occupation. We discuss profession only, right? In this syllabus only, right? So profession it is, right? Question number 3, when your ethical behavior erodes trust in investment firm, the firm is more likely to experience what? The firm is more likely to experience lower revenues and higher expenses, right? So that is what we have, because there is nothing like low revenues only, higher expenses only, because Ultimately, you are harming your company. Unethical behaviors ultimately harms investment firms. Clients are not attracted if they suspect unethical behavior, right? So cost also rises and revenue also go down. Okay. Then high ethical standards are distinguishing features of which of the following body, right? High ethical standards are features of professional bodies, right? And not the craft guild, not the trade body, right? It is professional. Fiduciary duty is the standard most likely to be upheld by a member of your profession, right? Be profession, not employer, not for non-profit, right? Because you are having a high standard, right? High standard we are talking about, right? So that is by a profession, right? Where you are high standard of uh, acting for the client, and professional must act in the best interest of the client, right? Then you have question number 6. Which of the following best identifies an internal trait? It best identifies internal trait that may lead to poor ethical decision making, right? Loyalty to employer, no. Promise of money or prestige. Uh, we are asking for internal trait, not something from situational influences. This is your overconfidence is the internal trait, right? This is your internal trait, right? When we go and if you think about loyalty to an employee or uh, you know promise of money, prestige, these are situational influences. Okay, so that is what we have. Okay, situational influences, right? Situational influences in decision making will most likely be minimized. Minimization of situational influences. Uh, we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Situational influences will most likely minimize when, right? Short-term compliance program in place? No. Short-term, sorry, will minimize strong compliance program? No. Strong compliance, people will shift to some other wrongdoing method, right? Longer-term consequences are addressed. Yes, that is what we look for, right? Individual believe they are truthful and honest. The belief does not matter, right? So situational thing influences can only improve, and consciously you are considering long-term consequences will help offset situational influences. We more easily recognize and consider short-term situational influence than your longer term. So that if you do longer term, it will help. Strong will not help because uh, you might move towards other method, right? Other thing where uh, you know uh, you might shift to other things which can cause uh, distrust or anything, right? So that's what we have. Okay. Then we have question number 8. Decision makers who use a compliance approach are most likely to what? See, when you use a compliance approach, you avoid situational influence. No, compliance approach can oversimplify decision making and may not encourage decision makers to consider the larger picture. So, you cannot avoid situational influence, but you can oversimplify decision making. So that's what can happen. Situational influences will still remain. You have to consider more factors when using an ethical decision making, right? So that is okay, right? Then we have question number 9. To maintain trust, the investment management profession must be interdependent with what, right? So regulator, employer, investment firm, right? It has to be interdependent with your investment firms, right? Because investment management profession and investment firm must be interdependent to maintain trust, right? Employers and regulators have their own standard and practice which may differ from regulation and standards set by your professional bodies, right? Then we have question number 10. Which of the following is which of the following which is an example of an activity that may be legal, but the CFA Institute consider unethical, right? See, making legally required disclosure in marketing material, that is, they don't consider unethical. Trading while in possession of material non-public information. This is very interesting. Actually, your CFA institute consider it as unethical, right? So this is B, right? In some countries, uh, there are provisions that trading while in possession of material non-public information is not prohibited by the law worldwide. And but CFA institutes consider it unethical. Disclosure by an employee of his or own company dishonest activity, right? This is what CFA institute consider as uh, ethical, right? We are looking for unethical thing, right? So this also goes away. An ethical decision making framework will most likely what include a predetermined uniform sequence. No, they're not predefined uniform sequence. It will be focused exclusively on conformable facts and relationship. No, helps avoid a decision that has unanticipated ethical consequences. So yes, that is what we are looking at. Basically, when you're using a ethical decision making framework uh, consistently, right, will help you develop sound judgment, decision making skills, avoid making your decisions that have unanticipated ethical consequences. The decision making process is often very, very iterative, right? So, as a decision maker, you may have, some phases in the framework. Decision maker should consider more than conformable facts and relationship. Decision maker should consider situational influences, personal biases, right? And it should not have a predetermined uniform sequence, right? So that is what we have, right? So this part is exclusively is the wrong thing, right? They should also focus on your what you say situational influences, personal biases. Then we have question number 12. Last question. When ethical dilemma occurs, investment professionals should most likely, right, first the raise issue with what? Right, a mentor outside the firm? No, nothing, no mentor outside the firm. Professional bodies hotline? No. A senior individual firm? Yes. This is what is the right way. Right, when a dilemma occurs, raising an issue internally with the senior employee is often a good starting place. Creates an opportunity for the independent internal review. Protecting the client and the firm may take priority over the position of individual professional raising a concern. Right, so this is very interesting that uh, sometimes protection of the client, sometimes protection of the firm may take priority over the position of an individual professional raising concern, right? So there is little interesting points here, right? So again, we have done all questions, right? Question number 10 is very interesting. If this question I have seen generally asked in exam, this question, please pay attention. Then remember that, maintain trust, management professional must be interdependent with another professional body like investment firm. Decision makers may use a compliance approach, right? If you look at that, right? So a compliance approach can oversimplify your decision making and may not encourage decision maker to consider the larger picture. So a strong compliance culture may be a good start in developing an ethical culture, but can become another situational influence that may result in your employee failing to consider other important factors, right? So we have that, and then uh, you look at uh, situational influences in decision making will most likely be minimized, right? So we are looking at minimization. So the idea here is that, see, when you look at question number 7, right? Consciously, when you're considering the long-term consequences that will help offset your situational influences, we are more easily uh, able to recognize and consider short-term situational influence than longer-term consideration, because long-term consideration have fewer immediate consequences. When decisions making is too narrowly focused on short-term factors, we tend to ignore your long-term risk. And a strong compliance policy is the first good thing. toward developing an ethical culture. Taking to the extreme, a strong compliance can become another situational influence. So this part you should understand. Too strong can become another situational influence. Okay, so that is what we have to understand, and an overconfidence bias can also place too much importance on internal traits, intrinsic motivation, right? Even though studies have shown that internal traits are generally not the main determinants. Okay, then we go to question number 6. Internal trait, when we're talking about overconfidence bias, can lead your individuals to put too much importance on internal traits and intrinsic motivations, right? Loyalty, etc., is your situational influence, right? Fiduciary duty, I told you, is for profession. Highest ethical standards are professional bodies. Low revenues, higher expenses, we talked about. Profession, we talked about. Laws and benchmarks are standards of conduct, right? So we discuss all this question, and CFA questions are the most important, guys, when you're preparing for the exam. These are the most important questions you should prepare. And these are the answers also which have been given here. So you can look at that also when you're studying. Okay. So that's it, guys. That's it. Not a hard chapter. Go back, revise it, understand it, right? Very, very important. And uh, ethics in general is very verbose, very tricky, right? Don't have a generic view, have a specialized view, be very, very specific here. It's 15 to 20% of your syllabus, 15 to 20% weightage in exam, right? So each word is important, each specific point is important. Look for the tricky question, be careful about reading the option, may, should, must, right? Each word is very, very important. The essence has to be understood, the meaning has to be understood, application has to be understood, and that's why we solved so many questions in the application part, right? So remember that. Okay. uh, all right, guys, with this I think we complete our lecture, and this is the first lecture, so it was very easy. Go back and study, revise it, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Okay. All right, guys, thank you.